What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today we're going to talk about NBA awards and how it's relevant for the hobby because the NBA season is about to start. Now, I'm specifically going to talk about NBA awards, but you can use the same methodology I'm about to use for any other sport, whether that's hockey, football, baseball, F1. Whatever it is, you can use the exact same methodology I'm about to explain to you here, which is basically just seeing what awards matter by looking at history. So let's get started. I am going to go through a list of individual awards, ranking them from least important to most important, and then going through some other things as well. So the one that I think is least important is the NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Again, this is when I say least important, I mean least important for the hobby and hobby value. Long-term hobby value. So if we go through this list and we just go back a few years, does anybody care about Rudy Gobert? Not really. Marcus Smart? Not really. Jaren Jackson? Not really. The exceptions are, and Draymond Green, honestly, not really hobby relevant. Important NBA players, but not really important. Joakim Noah, Marc Gasol, Tyson Chandler, Dwight Howard. The only exceptions are Giannis here and Kawhi, who won them a few years ago. But by and large, you go through this list, again, I think we already know this, but nobody in the hobby cares about defense. Defense matters in other ways, and maybe that's a whole other video some other time. But for hobby value, there's not much direct correlation between Defensive Player of the Year and hobby value, long-term sustainable hobby value. Now, let's go on to the next one. Sixth Man of the Year. You can see here, to be totally honest, you might even say that this is less valuable than Defensive Player of the Year. Look at these names. The only one that really matters is James Harden. And even then, is he really that hobby relevant? Right? Manu Ginobili had a great career, great sixth man, only won it once, but even then, he's like the best case scenario with his titles and being part of a legendary Spurs team, and even then, he's got no hobby value. And so this is why it made me laugh a year ago when Tyler Hero was going to win Sixth Man of the Year and was clearly going to win Sixth Man of the Year, and then I saw a bunch of stuff online about how he's going to win Sixth Man of the Year. My point was yeah, so what? Like, what does that matter? Doesn't matter for hobby value, but yet people were saying he's going to be the sixth man of the year. He's going to win. And, well, it's just nonsense, right? Like, none of these award winners matter. Like, none of them. Again, except with the exception of James Harden. Because if you're going to be someone who's legendary, iconic in the hobby, you need to be a starter, is the simplest way to explain that. You go back, the only one who's like an all-time great is Bill Walton. That was extenuating circumstances. So that's sixth man of the year. Let's now move over to most improved. And so here is the list. And you can see there are some, and I'm going to leave like the most recent years a little bit, like just kind of ignore them because time will tell. But if you look back, Pascal Siakam had a great breakout year. Is he hobby relevant? Not really. Giannis obviously is, but even someone like Jimmy Butler has had a great career. Iconic almost in his own way, right? But is he hobby relevant? Not really. Again, very few important, like, who is Bobby Simmons? I watched basketball for a long time. I barely remember Bobby Simmons. You'll be hard-pressed to find anybody who remembers Allen Henderson, Ike Austin, George Mirasan. There you go. So all of these players, again, with the exception of Giannis, and maybe Ja, depending on if he can get his act together and what he accomplishes. There's not a whole lot of signs that say that most improved player is an important award and that is actually relevant for long-term hobby value. But again, as we get close to, I'm going to say like February, March, you're going to see a lot of stuff on social media, depending on if you're in some card groups or follow various accounts. You're going to hear some hype being built around, you know who's going to win? You know who's going to win the most improved player? This guy. Yeah. You might want to bother looking at his cards. And just think back to this video, okay? If you ever see anything like that. Now, let's move on to Rookie of the Year. there are definitely some names here. Will Chamberlain, Elgin Baylor, Oscar Robinson. There are more notable names here, right? Larry Bird, heard of him. Michael Jordan, kind of big deal. Going on, and Duncan, Iverson, LeBron, and so there's definitely more to this list. Luca, but even then, you have your Wiggins, you have your Cats, who is honestly not very hobby relevant. Michael Carter Williams, Blake Griffin had a pretty good career, a few All NBA teams, All Stars. Derrick Rose an exception because of his injury. Kevin Durant obviously, but Chris Paul has had an amazing career. Say what you want about him, but he's not hobby relevant. So he's had a great career, won Rookie of the Year, it didn't matter. Emeka Okafor, Amari Stoudemire, all of these guys are notable players, but they're not hobby relevant. And just because you won Rookie of the Year, it's maybe a 30% chance that you become hobby relevant. Maybe. I haven't done the exact math, but I'm just eyeballing here. It's, you have a chance, but that doesn't mean you will matter in terms of hobby value, right? So again, when we get to the end of the year and they say Chet, Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, they're in the running. Whoever it is that's in the league, he's going to win Rookie of the Year, doesn't mean anything for his hobby value. I can't overstate that enough, right? Just keep that in mind. The next one, and we're getting a little bit higher on the list now, MVP. So you're getting to some big names here. You got Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Chamberlain. These are all important names. Kareem, Moses, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, MJ, of course. But even then, you'll have a Karl Malone thrown in there where does he really matter in... his rookie card in a PSA 10. Sure, it has value. But if someone pulls... there are no very highly valued inserts of Karl Malone or anything like that, right? Then you go through this list. Duncan, sure, maybe. But even a Steve Nash, back-to-back MVPs. Does he have long-term value? Not really. Dirk, yeah. Kobe, yeah. LeBron, yeah. But even then, you got a Derrick Rose from another. Think about Russell Westbrook and James Harden. Exciting guards back in the day. They've kind of fallen off. They're not really that important in the hobby because they've never reached that iconic status. And that's what's important, whether or not you reach iconic status. Winning an MVP gets you partway there, but I think it's winning it multiple times, like LeBron, like MJ, and then winning championships. An MVP by itself doesn't mean much to the hobby. Look at Steve Nash, back-to-back. Exciting player, part of an iconic team, the 7 Seconds or Less Suns, and yet no long-term hobby value. So that is the MVP for you. So whoever wins MVP this year, just keep that in mind. It might matter. It might, it's a pretty decent predictor of hobby value, but I mean, you could also just be the Karl Malone who wins it, right? So that's the MVP for you. Now we're going to some more fun awards. The NBA All-Star Game Kobe Bryant Most Valuable Player Award. That is a mouthful. And this is an interesting list because you have a wide mix of players. Unlike MVP, there's a lot of repeat winners, right? NBA or All-Star Game MVP, it's an interesting list if you look at recent years. But even then, you get the Russell Westbrooks in here, the Kyries, Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, Shaq. So there are names that where you're like, do they have hobby value? But then there's also, an AI is in here who obviously is important. But then again, you'll see a random John Stockton, Karl Malone, Mitch Richmond, Isaiah Thomas, Ralph Sampson. So there are some definite notable names. But again, it's not a slam dunk that you win the All-Star Game MVP, you're going to be someone important. Having said that, this is way more correlated with long-term hobby value than I expected from a award for a game that really nobody cares about in terms of its importance in the overall grand scheme of things. So it's actually surprisingly a decent indicator of at least having a chance of having hobby value. And now the final one, NBA Finals MVP. This is the one that actually matters to me. Because it means you've won the championship and you are the guy on the championship team. You know, if you look at this list, obviously a lot of MJ, but like Hakeem, he's somewhat hobby relevant. Dumars and Thomas less so. James Worthy less so. Obviously Magic, Larry Bird, Kareem, and all the way up that way. But having said that, you will still get a Paul Pierce, a Tony Parker, Andre Iguodala, absolute sham of an MVP. I will never get over that one. But so this is not to say winning an MVP in the finals will guarantee you long-term hobby value, but it definitely gets you really close. Like it cements you in that pretty iconic status. And again, that's what's important to long-term hobby value. It's not awards, it's not whatever, it's becoming iconic. It's like defining your era. And that's why I will be intrigued, honestly, what Kawhi's long-term hobby value is, because he's won 2 NBA Finals MVPs, but because of injuries and other stuff, he's kind of like in this weird middle ground that I find very interesting, to be totally honest. And so, yeah, NBA Finals MVP, definitely interesting. Now, the one that I think is interesting is All NBA. Here is, and I'm just gonna like randomly scroll to a year and see where hobby relevance lies. So we're gonna go down to, so I'm gonna do this. Let's go down, boom, right here. What is this? 2010, 2011. So look at this list. Kevin Durant, yes. LeBron, yes. Dwight Howard, no. Kobe Bryant, yes. Derrick Rose, no. But Derrick Rose had some extenuating injury circumstances. First team here is pretty good in terms of predicting value. Second team, less so. Pau Gasol, no. Dirk, yeah. Amari, no. Dwayne Wade, sort of. Russell Westbrook, no. You get to third team and like this is just all flat out no, right? And then you go down to like, go down even further. Let's go down to 2007, 2008. KG, yeah. LeBron, yeah. Dwight Howard, again, no. And again, Dwight Howard shows up on a lot of these lists. He had a very good career. He was not liked at all, and that's part of the reason why he's not valued in the hobby. But again, he's kind of like one of those players where he had a great career. In theory, he should have hobby value, but he just doesn't because he was kind of annoying and not liked by anybody. Kobe Bryant, obviously, and then Chris Paul, not really, right? And so you go down the list. So I think first team is a pretty decent indicator, but as you get down to the second team, third team, like Carlos Boozer, Paul Pierce, Yao Ming, Manu, like Trace McGrady, sort of, right? But I think first team is really making a statement. But you go down to the second team and third team, like Arenas, Chris Bosh, like Chauncey Billups, like third team, I would basically be like, not really. Second team, sort of. First team, definitely. And you can go through these lists and just kind of pick random spots and see what the first, second, and third team look like, right? Like third team, Jermaine O'Neal, Ben Wallace, Dikembe Mutombo, Steve Nash, and Paul Pierce. Not a one. Also, aren't all three of these guys centers? Anyways, and now they're here to that. And the last one, and I think the most important one, All-Star games. NBA All-Stars. You are, by January, you are for sure going to hear this guy is a first-time All-Star. His card, they're going to go up. You're going to hear that. You're going to see that in Facebook groups. You're going to see it online, social media, generally by people selling their cards. But I'm here to just dump a bucket of cold water on it and say, being an NBA All-Star matters, but only if you've done it a bunch of times. If you've done it once or twice, nobody cares. And here is why. Kareem, look, and this is being ordered by the number selections. Kareem, yes. LeBron, yes. Kobe, yes. Duncan, generally. KG, yes. Shaq, sort of, but not really, but that's another story. MJ, yes. Karl Malone, no. Dirk, yes. And then you get down here to some of the older guys, right? So it's like if you are showing up on this list like 10 times, we're talking here, right? You got Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Moses Malone. But if you're down on this list at like 3 times, like who is Johnny Kerr? You know, Chris Middleton, congratulations. Rudy Gobert, Marc Gasol, you know, Ben Wallace made it 4 times. Latrell Sprewell made it 4 times. Not a lot of Latrell Sprewell collectors out there. Bill Laimbeer, like, you go through this list, like the number of players that have been on the team, that have been on the All-Star team 4 or 5 times. John Wall made it 5 times, for God's sakes, right? Like Chris Mullin, Bob McAdoo. The list is such a wide array. Like Tim Hardaway was exciting. You know, I love that crossover. But that doesn't mean it's actually going to be relevant. So it's only if you're on track to be, you know, one of these, you know, 10 plus times. And even then, 10 times. Paul Pierce, Jason Kidd, David Robinson, John Stockton. What's their hobby relevance, right? That, it's making sure. So the point of this video, and I'm done here. I think you get the gist of it. It's just like, don't just think that because someone achieved or achieved something like making the All-Star game or won an award, that it is directly correlated with some kind of bump in pricing, long-term hobby value, or that it's like, oh, this card's going to the moon because this player is going to the moon. They matter in a small sense, and again, it varies based off of what I just showed you, but the thing that matters the most is how each of these things build up that player's legacy. What matters to long-term hobby value is legacy, is whether or not they're becoming an iconic player, a player that defines the sport of basketball, defines their era. That's what matters. And that's why players like LeBron matter. That's why players like MJ matter. That's why players like Kobe Bryant matter. And in a weird sense, that's also why AI is loved so much, because he was iconic because of his style. Vince Carter, iconic because of his dunks. Even though they didn't accomplish the same amount in terms of individual accolades, team accomplishments, titles, that type of thing, these players accomplished their becoming iconic in a much different way. And whereas like Lenny Wilkins, lovely player, didn't accomplish much, is not, you know, renowned. LaMarcus Aldridge, decent player, was never iconic, was never an all-time great, even though he was in 7 NBA All-Star games. Joe Johnson, longevity king, again. And so is that, like, you know, where a Damian Lillard will end up being if he doesn't win a title? Probably. He'll be in this nobody cares about you a few years from now because he didn't win a title, if he doesn't win one with the Bucks. If he does win one, that's, you know, that's a much more interesting story, right? So that's it. That's the video. Would love to hear what you have to say about this analysis. And again, you can apply this very straightforward analysis to other sports, right? Because you can do the same analysis for All-Pro in the NFL, or Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, for baseball, All-Star games, Silver Sluggers, MVPs, obviously, or Finals MVPs, Super Bowl MVPs, World Series MVPs, you know, all that kind of stuff, right? You can use this exact same thing and just like look through the history. It's just a history lesson, going down memory lane, seeing what history tells us about the players that have previously won the awards to inform you as to whether or not it actually matters that they won the award. So again, thank you as always for listening and watching, and I will talk to you all soon. Cheers.